Well, hello and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, Transforming Retail, Exploring the Potential of Generative AI. My name's Simon Gray. I'm a Chartered Accountant and Head of Business here at ICAEW, and I'm delighted to be chairing today's session. AI was the subject of last week's Bletchley Park Summit and also featured heavily in discussions at ICAEW's technology conference held in central London, profiling both the risks and opportunities the technology presents. Generative AI uses computer algorithms to generate results that resemble human-created content and is set to play an increasingly influential role in both our personal and professional lives. Today's webinar is brought to you by ICAEW's retail community, and I'll shortly be introducing speakers and panelists from RSM and the Very Group. A link to RSM's recent Real Economy report on generative AI is now being shared in the chat and will also be sent out in the post-event materials. So please have a good read of that. We encourage you to participate in today's webinar. We'd like to make the session as interactive as possible, so please keep your questions coming throughout. We have a presentation and then a panel discussion, so please fire your questions in and I'll feed those questions to the panel. You have the opportunity also to upvote questions, so please find the question box, type your question in, press submit. I'll see those my end and we'll field those questions to the panel as we go through. Depending on the volume of questions, we may not get to answer all of them, but there is an upvote feature, so please vote for the questions that you would like me to pitch and you would like the panel to answer. You can also use the question box to tell us about any issues you may be experiencing with the technology. We're not expecting any, but if you do have any challenges, then please pop a message in there. My colleagues in the background will do their best to resolve any issues that do occur. But to reassure you, we're not expecting any. And the webinar finally has closed captions enabled. In order to enable this feature, please click on the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. But please note that this transcript is automatically generated and errors as a result may occur. So let's start the interaction first off. I thought we'd do a couple of polls. I'm going to do a poll now, one slightly later on. So the first poll is around, my colleague can launch this in the background, is asking the question, which of the following best describes your understanding of generative AI as your understanding stands at the moment before the webinar? Few options. I have a good level of knowledge about generative AI, would feel confident explaining it to others. I have some knowledge about generative AI, but would not feel confident explaining it to others. I have limited knowledge about generative AI and would not be able to explain it to others. I have no knowledge about generative AI and don't know. So please select one of those options now, and that'll give us a clue as to who we have on the call. So let's have a look at the results. Okay, good. So 10% have a good level of knowledge, 22% have some knowledge, 52% have limited knowledge about generative AI, and 16% have no knowledge at all. Well, the good news is you're in the right place, because we're going to talk in depth about generative AI and how it applies to retail. And certainly from my conversations with regular conversations with members, most people I talk to have some knowledge of generative AI. It's hard to escape it, but actually that detailed higher level knowledge and being able to explain it to others can be a bit more challenging. So we're going to hopefully answer some of your questions today, and you'll leave the webinar with more knowledge about what generative AI really means and could really mean for your business. So today's speakers, we have three speakers. We have Ben Bilsland, Partner in Technology and Media Industry Senior Analyst at RSM UK, Jacqui Baker, Partner and Head of Retail at RSM UK Audit LLP, and Jonny Oliver, Head of Finance at the Very Group. And I'll introduce our speakers and panelists shortly. As I say, we have a short presentation to begin with. When it comes to the Q&A and the discussion, we're going to focus really on three areas. Number one, the emergence in adoption of generative AI in retail, the challenges and opportunities generative AI represents for retail, and then, of course, finally, regulations and risks and the practical, keen to focus on the practical use of generative AI in a retail setting. But to kick things off and set the scene, delighted now to introduce Ben Bilsland, Partner at RSM UK. Ben, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Simon, and thank you everyone for their time today. Let me just bring up the presentation and we can go. And I always say at the start, if the presentation isn't working, someone please do shout out, because one of the great benefits of technology here is lots and lots of Zoom sharing, but it seems something goes wrong every single time I do a presentation. So thank you for your time today, everybody. Thought I'd start with a quick introduction, move through 3 areas, talk about what ChatGPT is, what Gen AI is, and maybe talk more broadly about what the excitement is in the world across this technology. Move on to thinking about what it means for businesses and some sort of thoughts around adoption levels, and then finish off with some thoughts around kind of AI challenges and how you might start forming an AI strategy. So just to move brief onto intros, my name's Ben Bilsland, as introduced by Simon. I'm a partner with RSM in our technology and media industry team. So what I do is I work with clients in that sector. We talk about the sort of trends, both economic and technological, that affect them. But what we have with AI is this broader general purpose technology, something that affects lots and lots of industries and society. And actually, I've probably spent more time talking about AI outside of tech and media than I have within. And one thing I wanted to do was just give that broader helicopter view that hopefully kind of informs the discussion we'll move on to with the industry specialist for retail. So I was going to start with what is ChatGPT? I'm very mindful, most people on the call may have used or are using ChatGPT, but just taking a step back, what it is it's this kind of embryonic AI, this kind of early form of generative AI that's come out of an organization called OpenAI. And OpenAI was founded in San Francisco to develop AI solutions for the benefit of society and humanity. The reason it's really, really exciting is 2 things. Firstly, Microsoft invested between $10 billion and $14 billion to support the technology. And secondly, it was released in open beta, so open testing, free to use, in November 2022. And what it's done is it's raised awareness of generative AI across all of society and brought it to the fingertips of anybody who wants to use it on a smartphone or computer or indeed tablet. What GPT means, it means generative pre-trained transformer. But if you're going to kind of talk about what the tool is, it's a piece of software trained on a massive amount of data, in this case, the internet, up to a point in time. And what it can do is it can provide text responses to text prompts, effectively give you an answer that follows your prompt. So if I was to ask ChatGPT, what color is the sky, the tool will analyze how to respond to that question based on the data and come up with what it thinks is the best answer to that. So it will say, normally the sky is blue, or it may say the sky is blue. It depends on how I frame the question. And the reason it's really exciting is anybody can use it. It's massively versatile. It can do loads of things. You can use it to write simple meeting minutes. You can use it to write whole plays, translate languages. People have done all sorts of things with the tool. But because it's so sophisticated in its kind of technology and its responses, when it's wrong, it's convincingly wrong. And that kind of presents a risk in itself. And that risk is called hallucination. For many, it's really, really exciting. It's this new entry point into AI. What it has definitely done is bring AI to the kind of front of the boardroom agenda. And it's almost been the hot topic, not only in tech, but across, I'd say, most of business in 2023. Now, normally I'd show a video of ChatGPT in action, but here I'm going to do something slightly different. I want to show a visual tool. So ChatGPT gives text-based responses. What this demonstration is an image-based generative AI. And this is from Adobe, who developed Photoshop. What they've done is train their technology on effectively their image set. And this video shows a form of Gen AI outside of text. And there's just a few things I'll pull out that I think are really interesting here. The first is the way it's so easy to use. What you can see is the user typing in requests for the tool to be the images to be created. And it's able to kind of interpret them. The other is the speed. Whilst this is a promotional video, this is probably a realistic proxy of real time for this tool technology. These tools are really, really fast. And the other is this kind of creative aspect here and the adaptability of the tool for the common user. So in this final image set here, you can see that the glacier image is extended, but it provides different options. And I think when we move to the Northern Lights image here, it does a generative fill. You put in, I want to see the Northern Lights, and it gives you these different options and ideas, all of them kind of correct, but different. And the reason I just want to show that is to say that when we're talking about Gen AI, we are talking about a technology that can create new things from the data it's trained upon. It sits amongst a broader AI landscape of lots and lots of things to think about, but it's really, really exciting in itself because of its common application and its ease of use. There are sort of a few areas where we're seeing it being used in its capabilities. The first is around just content creation in text. So if you use ChatGPT or one of the other similar large language models, such as Google Bard, it can create natural language tests, human-like responses from simple sentences to entire email articles. It can write you emails, it can write you poems, it can write plays. Because it's trained on lots and lots of data, you can also use it for research tools. So you can ask the tool a question such as, to be an accountant, talk to me about examples of how IFRS 15 is applied, and it will come up with an answer. And the quality of the data it's trained upon will kind of dictate how good that answer is. But by and large, it's pretty good. I've just shown you an example of image creation, so what it can do across images. There's also an application in software where software engineers are able to use this generative AI to kind of improve their software work, which we won't go through now, but that's a really important application. It can also be used to create more functional things. And what I mean by that is I've kind of shown you an example there of how an image can be created and changed with the tool. In ChatGPT, it's kind of, you would use that tool to create lots and lots of content, such as please write me a play. But actually, it has a really good tool around summarization. So, generative AI can be used, for example, to record a meeting, to analyze the key conversations, to then extract the key kind of actions for each user, and then to communicate those actions to the people in the meeting, whether they were there or not. So it's a really interesting summarization tool in a business context. And it can also be used as a plugin. So one thing we're seeing, for example, are hotel booking engines where, effectively a ChatGPT enabled bot can kind of be attached to it. You can then talk to that bot and say, I'd like to go on holiday to a certain place, or I'd like to go on holiday to a hot place. And you can communicate with it and it'll come up with options which then feed into the booking platform. And actually what we're seeing is kind of generative AI being used as a plugin to existing products and software. So really exciting, although very, very emergent. And the reason everyone's really excited about AI, and certainly Gen AI, a broad forecast about how it can change society and have this massive economic benefit. And here are kind of 4 examples of reputable people talking about their forecast for the industry, for the economy. And 3 of these projections are based upon the idea of greater productivity, so making more with what you have, and the concept of kind of changing workforces. Bloomberg's is slightly different. Their market is kind of created on the concept of new infrastructure, new products, and new services, especially around marketing. But what you're seeing is a general consensus across analysts saying, actually, the benefits of this technology will transform the way we work and lead to better GDP, better productivity, better efficiencies. Now, one thing we did at RSM, and we have provided the link to this in the chat, and indeed we'll provide detail afterwards, is we surveyed businesses and said, okay, well, where are we at as business leaders with adoption in the United Kingdom? So the first finding we thought was really interesting was that lots and lots of businesses are using generative AI or experimenting with it. So actually, 45% of middle market businesses using Gen AI in at least one area of their business, 37% experimenting with it. And if we'd asked this question a year ago, I don't think a great deal of business leaders would have actually known the concept Gen AI, yet now we have kind of wholesale adoption across all sorts of industries. When we come on to kind of the key benefits of the AI, we started by talking about productivity. And most respondents said actually they expect greater productivity and efficiency. One thing that we thought was really interesting in our survey was 61% of respondents said they thought they'd see an increase in headcount due to AI adoption. And that's really interesting because the general sort of prevailing assumption is that when you have greater efficiency from your workforce, you would reduce it. But actually what we're seeing now is some people saying, well, actually, maybe this will create jobs. And whether those jobs are because we have a broader market which can increase growth, or whether it's because we need people like data scientists and engineers, to be seen. Alongside this optimism is kind of awareness of the need for greater risk and monitoring. Almost half respondents saying they had major concerns about data security and privacy. But then also most respondents saying, and it's on the right-hand side, they'd either developed an AI policy or generative AI policy, or were developing one to mitigate risk in the business. So boards are kind of moving to tackle this emergent area, albeit it's still early days and it's only been in play for a number of months. When we came to regulation, we were keen to understand, where were businesses at with regulation? And this links to the Safety Summit at Bletchley Park. With 50% of respondents being on the fence saying that regulation should balance innovation with safety. Now that's kind of your common middle position. But when you look at the extremes, we saw 37% of business leaders preferred heavier regulation at the expense of innovation, and only 10% wanting kind of a light touch regime. And what that represents, I think, is this kind of general rising awareness and kind of desire to make sure people are protected safely. And that's the whole talk at the AI Safety Summit last week. The whole agenda was about how do we develop these tools in the right way, but still monitor AI safety. So having done that, it's obviously something which is on the boardroom agenda, which raises lots and lots of challenges and starts thinking about what does an AI strategy look like. So just a few challenges to consider holistically. The first is around data management. So these tools are trained on data or fired by data. What that means is that the data you use has to be collated, stored correctly and security, and its integrity must be protected, because if there's an error in your data, that will feed through the tool, through the algorithm and into the output. There's this broader kind of idea around workforce. Now, AI for years has been talked about how it can be used to automate routine tasks. What we're seeing with generative AI is what we might deem creative tasks being impacted. You have this kind of general feel about how it will impact workforce composition. And alongside the kind of business concerns about how you recruit and retain talent with the right skills, also a need to maybe reassure people in the team who see this technology and feel threatened, and think about how you make sure they feel aligned to the corporate vision and the AI strategy, which we'll talk about in a moment. You have this kind of ever-emergent area of risk management around data breaches, inaccurate forecasting and prediction. So as we further incorporate these tools into our businesses and our products and decisions, an increasing risk that an error with those tools can lead to a problem for the business, both reputationally and operationally. We also have emergent regulation, and this is a slide that we're constantly having to update. We have foundational data regulation, like things like GDPR, but actually what we're beginning to see now are the emergent white papers and legislation from governments. The most recent being the executive order from the United States around AI policy, which was only announced last week. So emergent regulation to kind of monitor and think about. And finally, and maybe most importantly, ethics. The idea that if we're incorporating these tools into our businesses, we need to think about whether we articulate to our customers or our internal workforce and stakeholders how we're using them. And then this kind of constant need to assess that if we are using these tools, that they're doing so with a bias that is correct. And I say with a bias that is correct because, the nature of these tools are trained on data. Whatever data and biases exist within the tool will be reflected in the output typically. So this whole new area around kind of AI ethics, which has sort of emerged and become something to think about in the last 12 months. In terms of developing your AI strategy, there are 6 areas we're talking to clients about. The first is around vision. So the concept that Gen AI actually in itself won't solve most business problems. What it can do is allow you to achieve your vision in a different way. So thinking about how does AI fit within the mission statement and vision of the business, how does it fit within the structure of the business? So starting with, how does it fit? What can the benefits be? We're also talking about use cases, and by and large saying the best thing you can do is pilot and trial at this point. So take areas of the business which are perhaps kind of easier to monitor, and it's easier to capture feedback, run closed trials, think about how it works, and then take that best practice and think about how you apply it to bigger and more fundamental areas of the business. Don't typically run to kind of apply Gen AI solutions over your most important revenue stream until you're 100% comfortable that you thought through the practical and hypothetical risks of doing so and the pitfalls that may emerge that you can kind of identify through testing. I think data is the word that I've used the most in the last 12 months, but actually you just need to have a robust data strategy. The way you collect, store, maintain it is absolutely crucial because this is the kind of fuel that powers the tools. Alongside all of this is thinking about the corporate technology stack. And there's two sides of that. The first is the software, saying, okay, what software do we license or acquire to either gain AI capability or to plug into our existing tools? The other is the hardware stack. So there's this general kind of idea that to use more and more AI will require more and more computing power, more and more compute. One thing Bloomberg's projection I showed earlier has this inherent kind of assumption within is that refresh rates of hardware will be accelerated to kind of meet the need of this compute. And actually, one of the reasons that we have Gen AI today is that computing power has sort of progressed to a point now where they can run the large language models. So as that compute increases, we need to think about what we have within the business to, to effectively run and operate and stay on the front foot. I touched on people before, and I kind of touched on the idea of kind of, the empathy you show to the workforce and reensuring how they fit to the vision. When thinking about people strategy, it's a mixture of thinking about training for the people you have, thinking about composition and how that might look over the future and in the present, and also thinking about the skill sets you need to acquire as you continue to adopt more and more AI into the business. And then finally, kind of underpinning all of this is the governance strategy. And the important thing about AI and technology governance is this will probably need to be constantly reviewed and refreshed, because what we're just seeing at the moment is a emergent landscape around the rules and regulation. We're seeing the technologies advance and do new and exciting, unpredictable things. So the governance needs to move with the times and be constantly refreshed, and then communicated to the people and across the organization to make sure it's fully up to date. Now, there are more thoughts on this. We've included in our handout, we'll share some more detail around what sits underneath each of these 6 columns, and then a kind of projection around various levels of kind of data sophistication that might exist across the organization. Not too much time to dive into them now because that would take up far too much of the panel's time. So at this point, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. So interesting to present here, and I'll hand back to Simon for the introductions to the rest of the panel and the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Ben. Very interesting presentation, and please do have a look at the report that we shared the link in the chat. We'll share that out at the end of the session as well on that RSM report on generative AI. A very interesting read, and I think one of the things you mentioned, Ben, which certainly I've seen is just the speed that this thing is going and how fast it's going to continue to go. So please let's have your questions for Ben and the panel, which I'm going to introduce just after a final poll, and we'll have some good Q&A to do the mainstay of the session in. So let's do poll 2. And Ben, having kindly set the scene, let's ask a question about the current status of generative AI within your business. Are you actively using generative AI around one or more areas of the business, experimenting with it around one or more areas, not currently using generative AI, but plan to within the next 12 months? We are not currently using it and have no plans to use it, or don't know. Let's have a look at what people are doing on the session. So just give you another 10-20 seconds just to type in there. I'm gonna hazard a guess. I think we'll probably be somewhere in the middle, but let's see. Dom in the background, let's see the results, please. Okay, we're in the middle. Okay, good. So those actively using, 13%. Those experimenting, 26%. Not currently using, but planning to use, the majority, 29%, or the highest percentage, I should say, on the session. Not currently using and no plans and don't know. So I think what we can safely say before we go into the panel discussion is there are various levels of experience on this session of people using AI, some planning to use AI, some really not sure. So let's bear that in mind in terms of the panel discussion. So if I can ask our panelists to pop your cameras on. Welcome to Jacqui and welcome to Jonny. I'm going to pitch a couple of questions at you to begin with, and if you could just give us a very, very quick introduction just before you answer the question, that would be great. So I'm going to come to you first, Jacqui. So I think it'd be quite useful. We've had an overview from Ben. What would be quite useful now, giving the retail focus of this webinar, is to get an overview from you as to how your retail clients are seeing generative AI. Is it an opportunity? Is it something they're worried about? Is it something they're adopting? And how they're implementing it or planning to implement it in their retail businesses. So that's a big question, Jacqui, to kick off with. So over to you to answer, please.
I'll try and remember all the bits. Thanks, Simon. So as Simon mentioned, I'm Jacqui Baker. I'm a partner at RSM and national head of retail for the firm. My passion for retail goes further than the day job. I actually own my own retail business, so I do have a little bit more insight into this and a vested interest in what's being said today. Okay, going back to your question then, Simon. I would say many retailers are going for the low-hanging fruit at the moment when it comes to generative AI, and I'll just pick up on a few of those most common areas that I'm seeing at the moment. Any areas where there are large volumes of repetitive tasks, so I'm seeing it most in areas such as customer services, stock replenishment, HR and people functions within the business. And it seems to be those customer-facing activities that are being tackled first by most of my clients and contacts, which can help obviously with customer engagement, which is important at the moment. So such as improving search engines to push personal, much loved products and tailored offers to customers based on previous buying habits, for instance. And customer services is definitely a key area we are seeing it being used in. And if you think about it, most of us prefer to communicate via written communication. And well, it's actually as high as 68% of people actually prefer written communication in the first instance. So chatbots can be used as the first line of defense within a business. And, thinking about the wider aspects of that frees up customer service teams to focus on more high priority tasks where they can add more value and deliver a higher quality experience to the customer, which will ultimately boost brand loyalty, as we know. And those chatbots can work alongside human colleagues. Ben touched on a bit about, not necessarily replacement. It can work hand in hand, and those chatbots hold a huge pool of information to which the customer service team themselves can tap into that very quickly as well. So thinking about different parts of the business where Gen AI is being used, Gen AI can also be a more accurate demand forecasting tool. So granted, this is limited to areas where stock, for instance, is repetitive or core stock is replenished on a regular basis, but it can make quick automated decisions based on demand and stock levels within a business. And just thinking about the HR and people side of business, retailers are some of the biggest employers in the UK, and Gen AI is absolutely being used to support HR functions in many retailers. For instance, generating contracts, particularly at times of seasonal hiring, such as the Christmas period that we're going into. And it has also been used to generate interview questions to ensure that approach to interviews is consistent and fair across the board. So the use of Gen AI is very varied, and we are only just at the beginning of this exciting technology and what it's capable of.
Thanks, Jacqui. Great overview to begin with. Jonny, let me come to you next. Perhaps give us a quick introduction to you and the Very Group, and then perhaps give us some information on how the Very Group is using generative AI. If you've adopted it, how you're using it, how you're finding it. Over to you, Jonny.
Thanks, Simon. So I'm Jonny Oliver, head of finance at Very.co.uk, Very Group. So we're an e-commerce pure play retailer, so the biggest pure play retailer in the UK. Obviously, if you ignore Amazon, etc., who are multinationals and obviously an absolute monsters. But obviously, the biggest pure play in the UK. So obviously, a blended mix of tech and retail behaviours is kind of how we operate. So obviously, what we're looking for here is kind of talk through what we've been doing and how we've implemented an AI strategy. I think just to caveat, I'm not on commission for Ben, so I think a lot of what I'm going to say is really going to align with Ben's view on how to implement an AI strategy and what the kind of key fundamentals are to get there. So as a kind of e-com tech business, AI has been on our agenda for a while, and it's something we've been trying to implement and build. But obviously, with the boom and the access to different tools, etc., that's come recently, it's become much higher up on the board's agenda, especially the shareholders and the non-execs. Obviously, it's something that they're really interested in now, and it's top of mind. A key piece of the puzzle I think we found is to kind of get comfortable with the fact that it's here to stay. It's not a sprint. Obviously, there's a need to keep up with everyone else, but obviously, the key thing is getting yourself ready for the fact that AI is going to become part of your everyday life for a long time. It's not something that's going to be a blip on the radar. The kind of consensus is it's going to be key. So a key piece of that puzzle has been kind of taking a step back over the last couple of years and making sure the data sets and all the really the less sexy parts of AI around your tech platform, your data and all that sort of stuff is ready to go. So we've been on a 2-year transformation, kind of all your classic build a data lake, take your aged historic tech stack, which has been built on, and simplify that through. So obviously we've been in a process currently, and it's still iterative, and it always will be. We've got a good relationship with a company called Commerce Tools, who we're working with to kind of build our new tech platform that allows us to layer new AI tools on top as we go through. And what that links into is obviously AI is only as good as the data and insight it can access. So without that strong data set and without that clarity of what should be coming out the other side, it's hard to have that control and ability to trust in the data itself. So obviously, unless you've got that clarity as a base and you've got a good data set for the AI to use, it's going to be difficult to get a value out the back. Now, a big part of the puzzle that we're working through currently, before I talk on the actual examples, is also how to bring everyone on that journey with you. So even if you're a small business or a large business with 3,000 or 4,000 individuals working for you, there's a lot of work you have to do to get everyone on board with that transformation. So it's all well and good having the board on board with getting AI embedded. It's all well and good having the tech team, but unless you get the retail team, the operations team, everyone on board and moving along with you, that you're going to be basically, you won't be able to have the full impact you need. So a big piece for us has been, how do we get that data literacy across the rest of the business? So part of what we've done is to look at how we're structured. So we're on a process to kind of look at our organizational structure and drive change that aligns with being a tech business and a retailer, but also take advantage of what's coming. I'll try not to talk for ages because we want to get around some questions. What we're going to rattle through is kind of we've got 3 buckets within the very group in which we're looking at AI. And you'll probably look at some of it and go, that's not very interesting, but it's some of the stuff that drives huge value and allows you to continue your movement forward. So not everything I touch on will be truly generative, but it's useful to know that other applications of AI are just important in the background, as well as the new flashy generative AI pieces that you can now leverage through AWS and other tools. So we kind of look at it in 3 ways. You've got automation as kind of a work stream, you've got your data and decision making as a work stream, and then you've got your truly generative and kind of customer facing, which Jacqui was touching upon, around how to improve the customer experience on the front end of our kind of retail offering. So the automation piece covers a broad spectrum, and it uses your classic machine learning, but also generative AI as well. So from an automation point of view, we'd look at stuff like, from a finance point of view, you can run your repetitive tasks. You can use companies like Blue Prism, etc., to drive automation in your bank reconciliations, your AP processes, to take the pain out of some of the stuff that historically takes you a long time and bring that automation through so you can focus your attention elsewhere. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, we've leveraged IBM Watson to run our web chat process in the background, whereby we can take a huge volume of people's contacts out, whilst also ticking the box in regards to them wanting to contact you via conversation, via text form rather than a phone call, and makes a much smoother process for them. And then what that allows you to do is, once you've got that embedded in, you can start to tap into the generative AI potential of those tools. So with our web chat at the moment, it's a solid tool. It answers people's questions and concerns, but what you can start to do is get it to self-learn. You can start to get it to actively answer people's questions and learn from when you've had a failed interaction, and combine the two to take even more pressure out the system. There's also some stuff on that end as well, which is relatively flashy. So we have an automated warehouse in the East Midlands, which we set up just at the start of COVID. We're in the process of starting robotic trials, which is really, really exciting around. We have automation all the way through. So from in to out, it can go from decant onto trays and then overhead racking that moves everything around based on systems. But what we're looking at next stage is how to use robotics that use hive mind and generative AI to learn how to pick most efficiently. So you can leverage tools that interact with different companies' warehouses across the world. If they see a pair of socks and they learn how to pick that pair of socks, your robot will then now know how to pick that pair of socks efficiently and kind of drive those process benefits through. So there's a broad spectrum of what you can do, but they all have a huge impact in the business itself. From a data and decisioning, I think Jacqui touched upon it. We use AI models to look at our sell and demand forecasting, and what that allows you to do is access much bigger data points. So currently we have around 300 data points per customer, looking to move to about 480. For a human mind or an Excel document to try and pull all those data points in and work out what the right buying decision is near on impossible. But obviously tapping into AWS and also other AI tools and models, we're allowed to kind of compile all these data points and drive a much more informed buying and forecasting decision-making process that also takes the pressure off the buying team. They can focus on the content and the quality of the product and use that to inform their decisions. And we have a similar process in the warehouse whereby we can use AI that learns from people's shopping habits over the years to prioritize where stock is sat in the warehouse, so we can actually proactively pick products, especially around peak when we're processing orders from pick to dispatch in 30 minutes. You can use the AI models that essentially pre-flow product through to the packing benches without any human intervention at all. So they can kind of pre-look at what should come through, move that to the front, and then drive a much more efficient picking process in the warehouse. And then finally, to touch upon the generative AI piece, this is the bit that is obviously some implementation, and there's a huge spectrum of what you can do here. But I think we've got a couple of really tangible ones that we can talk through today that I think are quite interesting. Not as flashy as using the Adobe tool to kind of add waterfalls in the background of our products or anything like that, but I think there's a couple that are quite interesting from a retail point of view, but also from a finance leader point of view. So currently we've got a relationship with a company called Constructor, whereby we're building out a new product discovery platform with them that allows us to maximize our search capabilities, our recommendation capabilities. And what this does is it actively learns from individual shopping behaviors, but also collecting shopping behaviors to refine the search process. So obviously, if you just go by simple search terms, if I searched white Converse, you could bring up white Converse t-shirt, white Converse socks, and white Converse shoes. But obviously, we know that most shoppers, when they search white Converse, they want the shoes. So the Constructor platform in the background is able to learn from the consistent behaviors of customers and then essentially reorder the search results on your platform to improve conversion. And the simple way to look at that from an e-commerce point of view, it's kind of like having a robot on your shop floor to move around the visual merchandising based on what you know recent shopping habits are. And when a customer walks through the door and says, I want this, you could rejig your store to look exactly how that customer would like it. And it's tapping into those pieces. And what you can then do is, once you've got the initial setup there, there's scope for expansion to intent-based search. So someone could search a website for, I want a suit that is best worn in winter. And that would then bring search product terms all the way through that improve the search functionality there. That then tips into other bits and pieces that are a bit more interesting. So one bit that we're actively trialing at the moment is around, we've got a good, really strong relationship with Amazon Web Services, whereby we're working in collaboration with them. And one piece we're looking to trial at the moment is around product imaging, whereby we would shoot a product in our photo studio on a size 10 model. But then what we'd be able to use generative AI to put that dress or suit on a larger model or smaller model, and kind of flex that without having to take the actual pictures themselves. And that means you can have a much more tailored experience for your shoppers, so they can actually see what the product looks like on any body shape, anything they would like to see. And then from a finance point of view, one piece we're looking to tap into is Microsoft's strategic partnerships. Obviously, you've seen on Ben's page that they've invested heavily in ChatGPT and become an active contributor. What that means is they're looking to then implement they're doing it now. They're implementing ChatGPT functionality into their Microsoft Office suite. And what this means is one of the huge value adds you can have here is to improve self-serve and kind of liberate finance functions away from data teams to allow them to have much more punchy data analytics performance within your teams itself, and not have to rely on the data teams and other tech experts to start doing that for you. So, for example, Power BI is a hugely powerful tool that we should all be moving our way towards. But at the moment, there's a block between being able to use it and not being able to use it. And this bridge whereby if you get all the data plumbed in and you can use the ChatGPT functionality and training in the background to become a bit more Power BI literate, will improve people's ability. So these sort of co-pilot pieces is stuff that we're actively looking to deploy and develop as a business. So there's a huge range. It's very interesting, and it's it's an exciting time to be involved.
Thanks very much, Jonny. Clever stuff. Wow, fantastic. Thank you for that overview as to how you're using it at the very group. We've had quite a lot of questions come through, so I'm going to do my best to deal with most of these, or at least some of these, in the next 20 minutes or so. Claire, I think we've probably covered your question with Jonny's piece there in terms of how AI can be adapted to retail specifically. I'm going to deal with Philip and Martin's question together. So Philip asked around bottlenecks to adoption of generative AI, for example, the industry or organization size. And related to that, Martin's asked a question about how SME high street retailers who are not part of a chain are going to compete with larger retailers in terms of adoption. Ben, do you have a view on that? And then I'll come to Jacqui. Large and small, pace of adoption.
Absolutely. I think Jonathan's probably got a perspective too, being in the middle of it. The reason we're talking to clients about those 6 components is just to emphasize the point. It's not as simple as just getting one person in IT and saying, do our AI for us. It's a whole organization approach. I don't think you can identify one in particular bottleneck. I think it is company specific where you get to. And one thing I would touch on is I do think it starts with a vision. So making sure you have a clear view of how it might complement, and it all has to be underpinned by, appropriate governance. And that governance will need to be refreshed constantly in the context of an emerging landscape.
Thanks, Ben. Jacqui, anything to add on there as a smaller retailer?
Yeah, I suppose the way that we're using it, I actually used it to generate a contract myself from an HR point of view this week. So it'd be on a very different level to the likes of what Jonny's just talked about, but it's fantastic from a point of view of before your buying season, before thinking ahead to next year. We spend a lot of time analysing the data that is on Instagram, the likes, the customer buying habits. We're constantly collating that information and using that to generate decisions, which is the same thing. It's just that we're not spending a huge amount of money in investing in it because of the size of us, but that will only increase over time. The more that we use that will increase over time, but I'm absolutely trying to use it anywhere I possibly can.
Thanks, Jacqui. Jonny, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, but please feel free to comment on that smaller, larger adoption question that I've just pitched. This is a question from Sholto, who's asked a question specifically of you around the costs of generative AI as a finance professional, both internal and external costs, and if you have thoughts on how these will develop in your business going forward.
I think the honest truth, obviously, is a huge limiting factor. The cost of this stuff is not cheap, primarily because obviously it's resource based. So obviously we know that tech professionals in this space, there's limited supply and huge demand, which means then to get the high quality people you need in is a relatively cost heavy exercise, and also making sure you've got the infrastructure to get there. So there is an acceptance of fact that it is not cheap, but obviously what you've got to weigh up is the size of the prize and where you want to get on that journey. Now, there's obviously the sliding scale of where you go with that implementation. There's also different pathways to get there. So, for for example, if I flagged there the Microsoft strategic partnership with ChatGPT, there's nothing stopping people implementing that on a relatively low cost basis and kind of cherry picking their options. But I suppose the difficult thing is it's the same with every other business case, which is what's the size of the output on the back of the investment. And I think there is going to be some tough conversations at board level around how you prioritize spend and how you also keep up. I think that's the honest truth. It's going to be something that we face into, especially as it starts to accelerate. So obviously we view it as a long-term thing, and you've got to strike the balance between keeping pace, but also setting yourselves up for future success and not kind of throwing too much of it. I think one thing to watch, and Ben touched upon it, is obviously as capacity and computing power increases, the affordability of this stuff does improve. So we've seen a huge switch. So when ChatGPT Live, it was such a resounding success that you don't normally see of that scale in a tech enterprise with such large uptake. It forced the hand of the big players like Amazon, Microsoft, etc., IBM, to really accelerate and drive through huge advances in their own space. And I think part of the reason why it's become so active recently is partially because it has become a lot more affordable and there's a lot more available to get to. So it's one of those ones where the bigger businesses are always going to be flying ahead. You're never going to be able to keep up with Amazon. You're never going to be able to keep up with Google, etc., on these things, but they do filter down and affordable options do filter through. So it's just depending on appetite.
Got you. Thanks, Jonny. And are you using, to answer Sam's question, are you using AI off the shelf, or are you developing your own AI technology in-house? Is that something you might look to do in the future? Where are you on that journey?
At the moment, we kind of, a big approach we take is strategic partnerships. Obviously, that's a benefit of being a larger business in the realm whereby we can actively approach IBM and AWS and kind of proactively work with them to get stuff that is semi off the shelf and tailored for you. We do stuff internally that obviously is in-house owned. So, for example, all of our retail forecasting, our decision making around that is internally generated by our data and analytics team. But other elements are either off the shelf or a blended kind of semi refined off the shelf option that is fine tuned for the very group. So, for example, our relationship with Constructor, they're someone who's in the market, a big US supplier of tech solutions. We're working with them in partnership to use their tools and expertise to refine it for Very.
Thanks, Jonny. Going to come to Simon's question next. I think, Jonny, you'd mentioned this around, you've almost got to look at your data and clean your data before you plug it into an AI system, because what you put in is what you're going to get out. And Simon's asking a question around whether AI can help clean up and structure data to allow better data analysis. I'm looking at Ben on that one. Any thoughts on that, Ben?
I think
cleaning up the data.
Yeah, I think it can. Look, it depends on the data you're using as well, if that makes sense, and where you're getting it. One thing I just touch on, and this is more of a kind of forward-looking thought about data. As we rely at the moment, we're relying on kind of data we have in our accounting functions, our ERPs, kind of that we already play with in whatever form we have. But there is a kind of emergent world where like a lot of value will come from the data we hold in other ways. For example, the correspondence that the organization has internally about the challenges of keeping people motivated is the best data an organization will have about how to have a happy team. And the AI may extend to kind of using that data to think about how you plan your workforce. And I think a lot of things that, and Jonny touched on actually around the idea of the self-training robots picking socks. Within the organization, it's thinking not only about the data you can lay your hands on today that needs to be cleaned up for the immediate tools, but also saying, well, what other data exists that we're not capturing? And a good example might be in your warehouse, how do you capture the picking habits of your people, the robots? I mean, robots have sensors, but if it's done manually, how do you capture those trends? So there's this whole kind of brave new world, so to speak, around capturing data, which is probably a future problem, but something that's worth thinking about when you're thinking about what's within the business.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks very much for the answer. Jacqui, I think you'd mentioned chat boxes, and one of the most popular questions we've had in our chat is around chat boxes. I think we all experience these days when we're going around our retail purchases online. And the question we've had from an anonymous attendee is, where do they pull their data from? Is it general internet data, or is it linked to company data? When you type into a chat bot on a website, how do they answer in the most appropriate way using technology? That's quite a big question, by the way.
Yeah, and probably one for Ben to chip in on as well. But I think correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but it can come from wherever you want it to come from, or wherever you tell it to come from. So I think Ben mentioned when he did his presentation, what you put in, you only get what get out of it, the best that you can put in it. So if you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out, but it'll be very convincing when it gives you the answer. You create this data pool, this information pool, this large language tool that is set up where all the information is pulled from. And Ben, you probably want to expand on that, from where the information can come from and how that's put into that large language tool.
Yeah, to connect, I guess, a few dots here. The first is obviously when people type stuff into that chat box, you collect it as a business and you're holding that conversation. But if you're talking about using a Gen AI powered chatbot, what you might do is effectively license one of the large language models that's been trained. So, let's say ChatGPT, as an example, has been trained to be an effective communication tool. And then it's able to kind of operate across your sandbox of data to communicate and collaborate with your customers. One of the benefits of, well, I say benefit, one of the things that's happening is big tech being interested in this area does mean they are scaling the solutions out so they can be licensed by businesses. You don't need to go and train your own large language text model. You can use one that's powered by one of the big tech organizations who develop technology. We're touching on an important here, which is ethics. And I think chatbots is a really good example where if you have a Gen AI powered chatbot that's human-like in its response, do you need to disclose to the end user they're communicating with a piece of software or a human being? And actually on early chatbots, it's pretty obvious you were dealing with a robot, if I'm being honest, on most of them. But they're now getting so good that actually as an organization, should you disclose? And if you don't disclose, reputation, what does it mean if they get that answer wrong? How does your customer feel? And it's just an example we're touching on here on ethics, where, again, AI kind of penetrates new and interesting areas we probably haven't thought about before.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks. Yeah, I must admit that the chat bots that I use, sometimes you can't tell now who you're talking to, and you don't necessarily know until a live person is patched into the conversation. So yeah, very good observation there. I'm very, very conscious of time. Got a couple more questions that I'm going to pitch. We had the summit, Bletchley Park Summit last week, about AI regulation, and big high level, as you know, was on the news and we'll all be aware of it. I guess the question for this panel is, where do you see the next step in terms of regulation? Where's the UK positioned on that, and how might that impact the retail sector? Jonny, any thoughts? Were you paying close attention last week to the summit and what came out of it? What were your thoughts?
It's a relatively difficult question to answer as a non-policy maker, but obviously it's something that you've got to be aware of. Obviously, like the key thing is obviously, even though there's no specific legislation in place, obviously there is a lot of rules and regulations around how you use data, GDPR, other pieces that you have to still follow in the background. So from that point of view, obviously that is the key for us, is obviously making sure we abide by any rules and regulations that come with it. Around specific rules that may be coming down the line, obviously a big concern that obviously the sensationalism towards the end of the summit, obviously with Elon, around employment, etc. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of employment protection laws that came down the line in future around AI implementation, how you protect the workforce and how you make sure there's a balance between using tools. And obviously this is a long way away, but obviously using tools versus using the human workforce itself with aspirationally. I think that's something that probably will come down the line.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Jacqui, any thoughts on regulation, where we may see regulation going, following on from the summit?
Yeah, I mean, I think echoing what Jonny's just said, I think one thing we can be sure of is that the legislation is going to come thick and fast, and it's coming down the line very quickly. It's a little bit scary when you think about what Gen AI is capable of, and what we see now is so minor in comparison to what it's going to be in maybe 1-2 years time, not even 10 years time. So this is going to come very quickly, and we need to be businesses need to be awake and aware of it on a daily basis.
Very quickly on that, Ben, thoughts on regulation?
Well, up until last week, in terms of regulation, the European Union had a draft act around AI. The United Kingdom had a white paper, and the US was kind of quite quiet. But actually, what we saw at the start of the week was the United States released their executive order. Amongst many things in there that was interesting, one is the requirement for big tech to report the findings of their models to the government for safety purposes. And one of the things coming out of the summit was this, I guess, idea that governments will need to collaborate globally going forward, which I think is really important. The general risk is about how do you control bad actors. That's something which is often talked about, and I don't think there's time to explore that here, but should be acknowledged that I think a spirit of global collaboration is good, but the bad actors is one of the things that people are saying, okay, well, how do we think about that?
Yeah, good point. Thank you. So we are almost out of time, but Neil was the first into the chat box today with a question, and I think this is a really, really good question to finish on. I can't believe the time's gone. The time's gone so quickly. We had quite a few people from the poll at the start. It was evident that quite a few people are very early on in their journey in terms of generative AI and how it may impact their businesses. Neil's question is around from a tactical operational perspective, a CFO of a retail business. What should you be doing in the next 30 days to get yourself on that journey? And I'm going to come to each of you in turn with a final thought or anecdote. Does anyone want to go first? Ben, you got a thought on that?
I'm happy to go first. It's one of those ones where you don't want to steal someone else's answer, but I think step one should be an AI policy which protects against risks. For example, ChatGPT is used by everybody free of charge, but it's a non-approved tech stack. So have a policy around how that's used in the organization and think that. So put that bedrock in place to kind of protect against, I guess, risk. That's step one.
Yeah, thank you. Jacqui?
Yeah, absolutely. That's got to be the most important step. But I think just a basic sit down as a board, strategize what you want to get out of this, where you see the benefits, making sure that you're investing in the right parts of the business, and where you can get the most return, and not trying to overdo it in the early stages. Get that low hanging fruit.
Yeah. I think that's a point that's come across strongly today, and I think Jonny mentioned there is time. This thing's not going away, so take your time and do things in the right way. Jonny, final thought from you on the next 30 days if you're just starting out on this journey. What's your advice?
I think if it's a completely fresh conversation, I think the key one is obviously get the rest of the board agitated and kind of without kind of shirking responsibility. I'd turn around to the CIO if you've got one and say, write a paper, get us a clear view of what your take on what the best view is, and obviously then that allows you as the CFO to obviously then play your hand around kind of then what's the best use of investment, what have we got available, and kind of take that balance view. But I'd definitely push it onto the board agenda and start from scratch, I think. And then obviously then that allows you to have hygiene factors of create a policy, work out how much and what you want to do, the scope of what you're trying to achieve, and work out how much money you've got to play with, I think is a key one as well.
Yeah, going to need some budget for that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. What an interesting discussion. I think we could have carried on for at least another hour, but time is against us. Thank you for all the questions that have come in. I'm very conscious there are some questions we've simply not had time to answer. And what I've tried to do is pull out key themes that have come through from a number of people based on some of the upvoted questions. So I do thank you for taking the time to ask a question. Of course, thank you to our presenters, Ben, Jacqui, and Jonny. To reassure everyone, you are real people on this session, not generated by AI, but who knows where we may end up in the future. So thank you very much for your insights and being so open and honest with us as to how you're seeing things play out in your businesses and generally from your clients' businesses. Thanks very much. And thank you to everybody for being here today. I think based on the numbers that we've had today, what we know very clearly is that there is a lot of interest in AI and how it may impact not just retail, but other sectors. So please watch this space for future events and webinars that will run on this very topic. We're going to send out a very short feedback survey and a link to access this webinar on demand via email. This will come out to you a little bit later on today. And please do take a moment to complete the feedback survey. Your feedback is really important to us and will help us shape future events moving forwards. But right on time, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you to our panelists. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.